Welcome to the Course of Action podcast, available on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and your favorite platform worldwide, including the veteran-owned and operated Reeves Across America radio network every Monday at noon Eastern, 11 a.m. Central. All right, everyone, welcome back to Course of Action. I have a fantastic guest today, former Marine and former CIA paramilitary officer and author of this book right here, The Underhanded. You can see that my puppy liked it too because she nibbled on the corner, left it on the couch for 2 seconds and she nibbled on it. So it's Adam Sikes. How are you?
It's wonderful. Thanks for being here. And I'm flattered that my book is reaching more audiences, more readers.
Yeah. I was reading it on the couch. I was really enjoying it. I sat it down for like 2 seconds and walked into the kitchen. I walked back and I was like, why is it all bent up? Like, did I drop it instead of like setting it down? And then I looked at it and the corner was a little wet. And I was like, I looked at the puppy and she kind of gave me a side eye and I was like,
I always appreciate the books that have a little bit of love in them, whether they're, a little bit of grime ground into them or there may be a few folds or creases that have hit it. Yeah, those are always great.
She just got a hold of the cover though. So that first page didn't really mess up any of the pages. So I was like, okay, I was able to finish it. So yeah, it's a good book. Thank you for sending me the advanced copy. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So you were a U.S. Marine. When did you join the Marines?
I joined the Marine Corps in 1995. So I grew up in the 80s, when it was still the Cold War and, the big threat there was the Soviets, and had a very patriotic family. Both my grandparents were in World War II in the Pacific, and I'd always wanted to be a Marine, since I can remember. And then I got the chance and really enjoyed it. Spent 10 years in the Marine Corps.
What'd you do in the Marine Corps?
I started off in the infantry. At Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. And this was the 90s. So the state of the world was a little different back then. The Cold War had ended, and we were in this interlude period before 9/11. So did a couple floats to the Mediterranean. We went over there and we would hang out for a number of months. And, at that time it was the Bosnian conflict that was going on. Did that for a bit. Later on in 1999, started looking at what I was going to do next. I'd been around for a little bit, just about a heartbeat. And that's when I became an MSG, Marine Security Guard. And I spent a year in Moscow at the embassy in Moscow. And then I spent 2 years in Lisbon, Portugal. And that's when 9/11 happened. And I called up my monitor. And in the Marine Corps, we call monitors the folks that control where you're sent to your next duty station. And I said, I need to get back to the fleet, to a Victor unit. And I ended up with 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines, and had a couple tours in Iraq.
And when did you get out?
I left the Marine Corps in late 2005. So did the invasion for Iraq and then went back again for Ramadi and Fallujah in 2004 and 2005. I decided when I was an MSG working in the embassy community that I wanted to go do something else. But then 9/11 happened and couldn't leave the service.
Everything changed. Yeah,
exactly. Everything changed. That's why I joined, to be able to serve in that capacity. But I knew I wanted to do something different. So I left in 2005 after 10 years, which is kind of, as you know, from your time, the 10-year mark is kind of your halfway point of where you decide to stay or go. And so I left and went to Georgetown. Got my degree, and then a few years later, ended up at the Central Intelligence Agency.
Wow. So was the CIA kind of in the cards? Did you know that? Or did it kind of just kind of come to fruition? And I know a lot of people get recruited, especially Georgetown is a very big university. And it's very close too. How did that kind of come about? Did you see it coming?
I did not. And truth be told, I didn't have a intention to join the CIA. After 10 years in the Marine Corps and some of the things I did, at that point in my life, looking at where I wanted to go, there were a few other things I wanted to do. So being a diplomat with the State Department, I was strong consideration. I was working at the State Department while I was at Georgetown to help pay for my schooling. And so I was working at State Department. And so the foreign service officer was an option. I was being interviewed to be a corporate banker up in New York, of all things, and quite a number of opportunities I was looking at. But then I got a phone call. From somebody who called himself Eric. And he said, "Hey, can I talk to you for about 30 minutes?" I said, "Sure." I didn't recognize the number. It came up as, restricted. It was one of those phone calls.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Sure." And we talked for about 30 minutes. And, he says, "I'm going to interview you. And, we're going to talk about these things." And by the end of it, he says, "You kind of got a sense of where I'm calling from?" And I said, "Yeah, I kind of have a sense where you're calling from."
You read between the lines.
Yeah. There's certain phrases that are thrown out and certain words and discussion topics. And as operators, I think you zero in really quick about people's understanding of those types of activities. And 2 years later, I found myself at the Central Intelligence Agency as a paramilitary operations officer, and I was going to do covert action on behalf of the United States government.
Was that how it always kind of worked out? Like when you finally realized, like, oh, I might be joining the CIA, did you know kind of what you were going to go into, or how did that work out too?
Yeah, how that came about was essentially, like I said, I didn't apply or wasn't looking to do it, but somebody I had known when I was working down at Quantico. I was down at Quantico after I left the Marine Corps and before I was working at the state. I was working down at Quantico at the Marine Corps Combat Development Command doing some writing down there. Somebody I knew down there got a hold of my resume and then pushed it through this network that happens in that community. And they liked some of the stuff I'd done in Iraq and a few other things. And what I found out years later is the first gentleman who called me, the first interview I had, we were in Iraq at the same time. He was with the Central Intelligence, but I was over doing stuff else. And I found that out later. And I served under him 6 or 7 years later when I was in East Africa running around. He was my boss in East Africa. It's a very small community, the paramilitary world. Mm-hmm. And I was in ground branch now, ground department. And it's it's a community that kind of draws from the special operations world.
Yes.
So SEALs, special forces and all that. It's very networked. And we all come from different backgrounds. I was a Marine, but worked very closely with former special forces officers and SEALs and other people from that community. And we all knew, at a very, tactical level, we all knew how to do the job, the hard skills, shoot, move, communicate, medicate, and all that type of stuff. But with different backgrounds, we all got to interoperate together. So it's a very collegial atmosphere because we all know we got to come together and work as a team, whether we're working as a team or whether we're working with just an individual and where we are around the world. Great, exceptional cadre of guys, some of the best operators I have ever met, superhumans. I mean, when we think about people who've done amazing things for this country and the capabilities, I felt very fortunate to serve alongside these folks. And a lot of my friends are still out there today on the edge, and impressive folks for sure.
What was life like in paramilitary operations? Because oftentimes we see kind of what Hollywood tells us that it's like. Is it really like that? And what was your experience? I know there's certain details you won't be able to share, but generalize as best you can. Don't get yourself in trouble.
Yeah. Well, it's not Mission Impossible.
Okay,
but
fair.
It is definitely an exciting, interesting, and at times very challenging and rough world. So we're typically operating, as an individual or maybe with one other gentleman or gal, sometimes a larger team, but we're doing covert action on behalf of the U.S. government. And covert action, as it's defined by the U.S. government in Title 50 under the U.S. Code, is, activities undertaken by the U.S. government that will not, which will hide or not display the hand of the U.S. government, making it think we didn't do it or somebody else did. So there's a lot of tradecraft involved. You're trained as a case officer. It's not just paramilitary tactical type work. You're trained as a case officer as well. So in some of the places I worked, these would be considered war zones. And you have this dual job that you're doing. You're collecting intelligence, you're running sources, you're recruiting assets, as well as conducting tactical operations for whatever the orders and authorities might be for that particular region. Other times, I operated in Eastern Europe, which at the time wasn't a war zone. Yet we were operating and doing things that had a covert action element to it. And we were trying to achieve our particular mission for extended periods of time. And there could be, a lethal component. There could be a danger component involved with it. But again, we're going after sources. We're going after intelligence. Or we're going to try to find somebody. Same thing in Africa. Africa was very wild. Joked it's kind of like the Wild West down there because there's not a lot of laws or things or infrastructure. So you've got to really figure some things out as you go. The more creative you are, the more ability to make decisions without a lot of guidance. That was critical. When we looked at new paramilitary officers, when we were hiring, because we would do our own internal hiring, it was less about could they shoot? It was less about could they drive, could they jump, could they dive? It's less about that. You got to be able to do those things. And those were a given. It was just you either can or can't operate at that level.
Right.
But we would really assess hard was the mentality, the decision making. A lot of guys are older because you need that experience. You need that background to be able to make decisions with minimal information that could have strategic impact that could reverberate around the world.
Yeah.
And you have to understand the geopolitical situation.
Yeah.
Exactly. You have to understand the geopolitical situation. You have to be able to communicate very effectively, both verbally and in the written word, because whatever you're doing, I've never seen James Bond ride a cable or anything like that. But when you're out there, when you're out there and you're doing something, you have to be able to inform your superiors, all the way up to the NSC, what's happened so that they can make decisions. The CIA doesn't make policy. We're acting on the authorities and executing the policy that the president and the executive branch is directed to do. So you have to be able to communicate this stuff up. You have to be able to do it verbally. And you have to be able to operate at a very granular tactical level as well as a very polished level. And you can find yourself in all these situations around the world. I remember some days coming off of a target, and then within 12 hours later, I'm, having a pizza and a beer back in, Virginia or someplace else. And so you had to be able to shift very quickly to do that. And it's tough. It's tough on the psychological mindset to be able to do that stuff.
Well, I'm sure it's not a career for people to stick around in for long term. I imagine that a lot of folks kind of do some time and then they leave. Like, how long did you do this for?
So I was in an operational sense for just under 10 years. And then I became overt, which is, why, I can say that I'm a CIA officer and it's on my resume now and all that. But a lot of folks do it for years. They do it for a very long time. And it's a calling, it is one of those lives that if you're not cut out for it, you'll realize really quick that this is not what you want to do. And it's going to be a challenge for you to see. But some people keep doing it, and they keep doing it, and they keep doing it. And they're good. You're wired a particular way. You realize that it's not about fame. It's not about money. It's not about all that stuff we hear as veterans. We do it for the service.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. But take it one step forward where your life is dedicated to that mission and how you're going to live and what you're going to do. And it will take its toll. But these are,
I'm sure. I have no
Yeah,
doubt.
these are good folks. These are good folks. I'll say that. A lot of people like to demonize the CIA and the NSA and all these things, and it makes for great fiction. It makes for great movies when you have these crazy conspiracies going
Oh
on.
yeah, it's easy to
But
do that
yeah,
with politics and senior leaders and corruption. It's you can sometimes it's not even a stretch.
exactly. But you meet some of these folks and you get to know them, and you realize that
Yeah, the
they're
guys on the
doing it.
ground, the guys in the back doors and in the rooms, really, really rocking the mission and getting it done. It's the same thing in the military, as you know. You have the bureaucracy, you have the people at the top who, they gotta play their cards the way they're supposed to and all that. But then the guys, in the tanks and the infantry on the ground, cranking wrenches and all that. I mean, those are the guys getting the real work done, and those guys, those are usually really solid people. People who make it up to the top, they make it there for a reason. I've met plenty of people with stars on their shoulder who I said, I mean, it's obvious how you got here. I mean,
Yeah,
you're in place for a
yeah,
reason. Nothing,
yeah,
not taking anything away from your service or what you did, but I get it.
yeah,
It's politics.
yeah. Um,
So
yeah, it's a complicated world.
yeah, oh yeah, I imagine so. So did you always know you were going to write a book, or did kind of like your experience from the Marines and the CIA kind of tell you like, I should tell some stories. I've been involved in some stuff. I should be a storyteller. When did that kind of come on?
I grew up reading, Tom Clancy, Robert Ludlum, and Larry
Hmm.
Bond, and all these guys. And I've always been a reader. I remember when I was a young kid, and my grandparents lived in the Sierra Nevada mountains. They had a house up there, and that's where they retired. And I remember reading, and they didn't have any TV. This was long before satellite. There was no TV, no nothing. So we would help them cut wood during the day, and at night we're either talking or we're reading. And my grandparents were big readers. They had this library that was also a guest room, but it was just stacked full of books.
Mm.
And I remember consuming books up there all the time because we'd go up there for a week at a time. So as a young person, I was a big reader, and it stuck with me while I was in the Marine Corps and for years after. I remember on those deployments to the Mediterranean in the 90s, I'd bring stacks of books with me, and I think I read the entire Ludlum canon while I was over there. I think I read every book. I'd bring them all with me. It was before e-readers too, so these were hardcover.
Carrying some weight.
Exactly. I carried books with me during the invasion of Iraq too. Those are the I had two books with me that survived because my pack with all my clothes just got blown up actually, but I had my assault pack that had ammunition and two books. That's what survived, but my clothes got destroyed. Anyway,
Wow.
that's a whole nother story. Um, but I always enjoyed writing. I did. I enjoyed writing in high school. I enjoyed uh, um, academic writing. I enjoyed professional writing, and I did that both in the Marine Corps. I did that academically. My graduate work was history, so I'm a academically trained historian, and really enjoyed writing then. And for many years, I thought if I ever did write a book, it would have been a nonfiction book. It would have been something about counterinsurgency or national security or something like that. And then there was probably a change in me professionally going on probably 9 years ago, or more than that, probably over 10 years ago, where I started thinking about what I kind of wanted to do. And at this point, I'd had a good 15 years in national security and done quite a few things. And truth be told, it was weighing on me. A lot of
Hmm.
different things were. And I thought about, hey, what makes me happy? What do I enjoy doing? I enjoy reading. I enjoy telling stories. I'd never been a storyteller per se, but I started thinking, well, why don't I just try tooling around and see what I can do? So I was in East Africa at the time. I was working with one other gentleman, a SEAL. We were running around doing our thing, but we had a good amount of time where we were in a safe house together. And I'd already read through the entire Game of Thrones series. I'd already watched the entire season, all seasons of The Big Bang at the time. And so I had a little time. We're still hanging out. We could only use the rower and exercise so much. And I said, well, I'm going to, start, I'll work on this scene. So I was still in the agency at the time. And I knew we had a review board that would have to review anything that I would look to get published. And they have to review anything that I could possibly have known about or been involved with that pertained to national security. So I started writing a historical fiction novel.
Very
because
broad.
I figure if I back it out 100 years, that should be okay, and I shouldn't have too much challenge in getting through the review board. So I probably wrote this one scene, rewrote it 30 times as I'm just trying to figure it out and do this stuff. And this scene eventually turned into a book or a manuscript that I eventually tried to get published. And fortunately, that book will never get published because it was atrocious. But that process, led me to working with a developmental editor. And then working with a developmental editor landed me my agent. And then working with my agent and a few others, eventually Landslide came to be. And that was my debut novel that came out in 2022. And so I wouldn't say this was one of those things where I woke up as a fifth grader and said, I'm going to be a writer and I'm going to write a book. It was this building over years and years, and then realizing how much I enjoyed the writing and the writing process and how good it was for me as a veteran.
Yes.
And that it's something where now I wake up excited to write. I wake up excited to read and be immersed in this community. I get up at 5 a.m. before the sun is up. I got my coffee, and I know you and I have a shared interest in good coffee.
Yes.
But I've got my French press, and I keep the lights off. I have a banker's lamp that I use, and I write at 5 a.m. And that, for me, is one of the best times of the day doing that.
Yeah, let's talk about coffee. I know you want to talk about it a little bit. You got your coffee cup right now.
I do, yeah.
What's Adam Sikes' favorite blend? Start there.
Yeah. So I have a French press that I mentioned before, and that's how I make my coffee. But my preferred coffee is Trident Coffee, which is
I've had them.
out. Okay, yeah, it's out of Coronado.
Yeah,
and it's a bunch of former SEALs, and they made started making this coffee, and they're really well known for their iced coffee. So you can buy their cans of iced coffee, and they're wonderful. But I have found that their Dreadnought blend, for me, and I'm a deep, rich, bold coffee. I mean, I lived in Europe for years, so for me, the dark espressos and the cafe au laits with rich, big coffee flavor is what I really like. And their Dreadnought blend, for me, their roast is really good. And then Gavalia, I'll add a scoop of that, which just smooths everything out. And I have found that, to me, it's just the best, smoothest, deep, rich coffee I can drink.
Yeah, I like a good dark roast. I'm a dark roast fan. I like those chocolate flavors, that deep coffee flavor. I really like it. I've been trying a lot of different stuff lately. I have a company called Snake River that I just tried. They're out of Montana. I don't think they're veteran owned, but they were really cool on social media. They messaged me, and I tried 2 of their dark roasts. It's pretty good. And then who else have I tried lately? There's a veteran on Instagram. He runs an account called Degenerates Drinking Coffee, and he posts stuff about coffee, and he posted a coffee joint called Onyx Coffee Labs, and they're right next door to me here in Oklahoma and Arkansas, and just a couple hours away. And they have some really cool stuff, but they're a little bit more of that craft coffee, that real serious about the origin, and you can get real nerdy with it with them. But they have some really cool coffees that I've tried a couple of those that turned out really good. One there's a dark roast that I just got from them that's really chocolatey. It has a really deep, dark chocolate taste to it that gives you that real good coffee taste to it. So, I love coffee. I could do it. I could drink it every day, rain or shine, 100 degrees, -20 degrees.
You probably got issued this when you were in the Air Force, but the ability to drink coffee at 9 o'clock at night and then fall asleep at 9:30. It's probably
Yeah, yeah. It wore off when I when I left
yeah,
the service. It kind of wore off. So now I'm like at that like 1 o'clock cutoff. Like I can't have
oh yeah,
caffeine after 1 o'clock because then I won't sleep at night. But like yeah, when I was in, we did 24-hour ops and stuff like that. Like it was nothing to put on a pot of coffee. We'd be drinking coffee at 3:30 in the afternoon. Like it was no big deal, and I would pass out at night, no problem by 9 o'clock. Like
yeah.
it did not matter,
I
especially
know
some of
that
the stuff
well.
we used to drink back then. Like we didn't have
Oh, jet
Black
fuel, jet
Rifle and
fuel.
all that. Yeah, we were drinking Folgers and Maxwell House and whatever we could get our hands on just to stay caffeinated. But yeah, I
I'll have
got a
to
really
check out
cool.
that.
Yeah, you check out Snake River and check out Onyx because they were they're pretty cool.
Yeah, I another cool coffee story. So again, I was in the agency and in East Africa, and there was this restaurant that we would go to, and we'd get lunch there. And this was before we went downrange to do what we were going to do, if we're going to be there for an extended period of time. But we'd go get lunch there, and they would roast the kilos of coffee for you while you're eating lunch. You tell them how much you want. So we'd get 4 or 5 kilos. And that's what we'd take when we'd go downrange for extended periods of time, because we had to bring a lot of our food with us with what we were going to go do. So coffee was a requirement, and it was some of the smoothest coffee. You didn't need creamer, you didn't need sugar. I generally have cream with my coffee, but that was one of those coffees where I was fine drinking it black, and we couldn't get any milk, so that was the other reason. But
I really want to try some. They say coffee originated in Yemen, and I really want to try some different coffees from Yemen. I've looked up a couple of different ones and they seem really good. Man, they're like $45 a bag. And I'm like, well, that's an awful lot to just try. What if I don't like it? Then I have to drink it because I'm not wasting $45. But yeah, I want to try some different stuff from around the world just to see what everybody else has to offer. And I got a coffee tree. I actually bought one. It's not very tall. It's only like 8 inches tall. And it takes several years to produce cherries, which I don't believe it'll ever will. It'll be a house plant, but it's just kind of cool to think that maybe one day I might be able to have my own home blend.
you're roasting your own.
Yeah. My wife thinks it's ridiculous, but I was like, hey, it sits in my office at work, and I'm like, you know what? It's gonna maybe one day it gives me next. Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
So let's talk about your books. Landside came out in 2022. Huge opening. I saw tons of coverage on it on social media. It just seemed to be just explode. And then, did you always have a follow up in the Underhanded? I know it's not a direct sequel, but like, did you have intentions of doing Landslide and then doing the Underhanded, or was a series involved? How did that kind of work?
So Landslide is based off my experiences when I was still with the agency. And, as a writer, that anything you write about, the characters, the events, they're typically composites of stuff you'd experienced, encountered in your life. And yeah, we make stuff up. I'm reading a book right now, and the author, it's a brilliant book by Lisa Unger and very entertaining. But I know she has never personally been in that type of situation where they're in a house and there's a hurricane and everybody's trying to kill each other. I'm sure she hasn't done that. But the characters and the situations and everything are based off our experiences. So Landslide was based off some of my experiences at the agency in Ukraine before the invasion. And I intentionally chose Ukraine as part of the setting and the plot because at the time when I was writing it in 2016 and 2017, it was not headline news. Russian Federation had annexed Crimea in 2014. But by that point in 2016, 2017, when I was writing it, there was not a big deal. But a few years later, Russian Federation invades, in February 20 of 2022, and my book comes out a few months later. But yeah, it was intended to be a series. And I am feverishly trying to finish the second book right now. I just finished the last chapter, and now I'm trying to make sure everything fits together. With spy thrillers, when you try to thread and weave a complicated plot with some twists and turns and then develop layers for your characters and depth, it takes a while. It takes a while to write that. It sometimes takes
Yeah.
me about a year to do that. But I've now got to go back and make sure it all makes sense as a story. So that's in the process right now, the sequel to Landslide. The Underhanded had been a book I'd written previously that did not get published. And in conversation with my agent, she said, that was a really good book. And this was after Landslide had come out. She says, you know what, that was a really good book. I really liked your storyline. You're a better writer now. You understand story and development much differently. Why don't you go back and tune that up and see what your publisher thinks? So that's how The Underhanded came about, is I'd written it prior to Landslide, but it was a good book. So I went back and rewrote probably 3/4 of it, but I had the foundation. And that's what comes out April 2nd. It's not the sequel to Landslide.
Mm-hmm.
I would classify Landslide in the spy genre as a much more gritty and sometimes dark spy thriller. The main character, Mason Hackett, he's dealing with a lot of demons, and he's thrust into this situation where he's got to uncover the truth about his friend who he thought died 15 years ago. And he's pushed into this conflict zone in eastern Ukraine where it's very, very difficult, very violent. And how does he survive and get through that? Whereas The Underhanded goes back in some ways to my academic life and my experiences in Bosnia back in the 90s, and the things I saw there with the genocide that was going on and elements of that. And then meeting years later a professor who in the 90s was working in orphanages in Bosnia. And when he and I connected 15 years later, we just developed a very good friendship, and we were able to talk a lot. And there was things I encountered when I was at the agency working in Eastern Europe with certain types of extremists. And then some of my academic studies, it was, this idea, we talk about great events in history and whether they're maybe driven by these great personalities, the great person theory,
Mm-hmm.
where it's, the Churchills and the Mussolinis and the Napoleons, they drive history. But there's this other aspect of it that is, we realize history takes turns and comes about, and world events are shaped by people who may not be in the limelight. They're the deputies. They're the people in the background, and they're influencing events. And then I combine that with today's world with big data, social media, influence, deep fakes. And that's how this Underhanded came about, where it's this professor who finds himself in a challenging situation. His life is not what he seems, always thought it was. And you have an adrift MI6 officer, and they find themselves going up against this conspiracy that dates all the way back to 1870 in the Franco-Prussian War.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the professor and why you chose a professor, but after you told me that you studied history and your connections to academics, I was like, okay, I think it makes a little more sense. But did that kind of come naturally to have him be a professor and kind of put him in that? Because I really like that angle.
I enjoyed it. Brad Meltzer, James Rollins, Dan Brown, Steve Barry. These are some of my favorite authors. And I love those books because they're an escape. They are an escape. There's some element of history that they've interwoven to create this conspiracy or this underlying plot. They have characters that you want to get to know. I mean, some of these characters, like I always think of a good book is when I get to the end, I feel like I'm saying goodbye to some friends, but I want to come back to them. So I want the next book in the
You feel like you know them well enough to carry on and say, okay, I got to hear more, buddy.
And I like the conversation. So that's what I tried to do with The Underhanded. I tried to pull this historical component, and I'm like, well, I got a history degree. I can kind of work with that, but I got to put some other elements. I got to put some other elements in there so that he can survive this gauntlet that he's about to run through. So you pair him up with an MI6 officer, and I got to work with some of those folks over the years and stuff like that. So that was an interesting element to bring in. And again, the historical piece, The Franco-Prussian War was in 1870, but that did have a lot of impact on the 20th century. If you look about how the road to World War I, and then from World War I, the road to World War II and the Cold War, you can find this thread that goes all the way through. And so I tried to tie those things together in something that would entertain people that they'd want to read.
It's definitely very interesting. I like the professor angle. It definitely kind of puts it in a situation where you immediately put his back against the wall because he's in a situation that he should not be in. He's widely out, prepared and out trained to do any of this. Of course, put him up with the MI6 officer. Now, how did your experience of working in the CIA and paramilitary ops help you in kind of writing this script to the story, and especially working with a foreign intelligence service?
So the type of characters I like reading about or watching in a movie, and I think there's other readers out there who might feel similarly, is they're resilient. The characters are resilient. They are not superhuman. Although those movies and stories are awesome. I love them. I love when you've got, these super talented people that are doing amazing things. I also appreciate a human element where we're not perfect. We don't always make the right decisions. As anybody knows who's been in high pressure environments, especially when there's bullets flying, is you don't always have enough information to do the perfect thing. And you're making decisions that could impact life and death, yours and others, without a full understanding of the situation. And sometimes in intelligence, when bullets aren't flying and you're just working with minimal information, there's counterintelligence threats. You don't know if people are telling you the truth or not, how you may be being manipulated. Again, you're making these decisions with insufficient information. And so if you make a mistake or something bad happens, where's the resiliency? How do you overcome that? How do you keep going, not get discouraged, not fail? Sometimes there can be a traumatic incident. And what do? Do you get up or do you go home? And even when you don't have a choice, whether you can or can't go home, how are you going to succeed? As a paramilitary officer, that's a lot of what's going on. You have insufficient information. Sometimes it's just you. Maybe you've got one other person. You may not have instantaneous communications back to figure out what else is going on. Mm-hmm. And you're having to make these decisions and move forward. And then how do you do that when things don't go how you thought they were going to go? How do you adapt? How fastly and how quickly can you make decisions to make a bad situation that just really fell off the rails and walk away from it? I've been in those a number of times where we thought, or I thought, everything is good. We're moving forward. All the indicators say that this is safe. We're going to get what we need. And then we realize, oh no, they're going to try to kill us right now. What do we do?
Yeah.
And
plot twist.
Plot twist. So how do you move beyond that? So those were some of the things I tried to explore with these characters, that you might get a lot of punches. You might take a lot of punches on the chin. You might get knocked down, but how do you get up and keep going? And how do you do that without being a superhuman? How do you do that when you're just an average person who is trying to lead a normal life, but all of a sudden you found yourself in an environment where you have to overcome and react?
And how does that kind of play into the future of your writing? So you have Landslide out, the Underhanded is coming out. This will, people will hear this podcast when it's released and ready to buy. How does that kind of help you in the future of writing? You got this, follow up to Landslide, and kind of what's next.
So, as you just mentioned, I'm finishing the sequel to Landslide right now, aiming for a 2025 release for that. I'll be writing the sequel to The Underhanded as well, because it ends up, leaving it in a position where there's going to be a follow-on, and my agent would like me to write the sequel to that too. At some point, though, there's some elements of writing and novels and storytelling that I don't think I'm just ready to write yet. And so I've been thinking about those, over the years. And I, love Jean Le Carre and McCarran and all these writers out there. And there's a lot of great writers that are coming out now. David McCloskey and Ice Berry and a few others, and Paul Biddick and a few others. I mean, just super talented.
Yeah,
folks.
Beautiful spy novels. I mean, just excellent.
Wonderful stuff. And so I've been trying to think about how I take my background in the paramilitary world, in covert action, and then develop and write one of these other types of spy novels. Because there's a bit of action in the novels I've been writing. How do I create some additional layers and twists and turns? And I think about the characters. And, the intelligence world is a dark, dark world. You don't always have all the information. You are making decisions that are going to impact other people's lives. You are doing things at times that if people viewed in just an isolated event, that they could put a lot of judgment on, that it was unacceptable and the wrong thing to do and morally unacceptable and wrong. But then when you weave it to the bigger issue, you realize that you're in situations where you're trying to pick the least worst option. And you're trying to push things forward and work in this environment where there are lies, there is duplicity, there are people that are multiple faced and internal motivations, yet that's also juxtaposed against people, like I was talking earlier, that have very good intentions, very strong and beliefs that they need to do the right thing for good of people and good of others. So how do you interweave all these things together in a spy novel and with this paramilitary component? And that's what I've been, marinating on for almost 5 years, on how I'm going to do this. It's starting to formulate. When I drive or I run, I think about writing when I'm a runner, and I do my best thinking when I'm running. I will plot out a chapter while I'm running, take notes on my phone really fast and keep running, and then take notes on my phone real fast and keep running, so I don't forget everything. But that's where a lot of my creative juices flow, is when I'm running. And so I've been doing this for years, and eventually that story is going to come out. It's not ready yet.
I could see that being a very lengthy process and difficult to do, to get it right. And the spy novels that I have read, McCluskey and Barry, I've read a couple other ones. They are very dark, and they're not action oriented. It's the tension, it's the unknown that they master so well that really hooks you in. And I could see where it's not easy to write an action scene, but I could see where inserting an action scene in order to crank things up a little bit is maybe a little easier to do, as opposed to you have to try to draw attention from the unknown. That's got to be difficult to do, because you're leaving the reader, uninformed, but on purpose. But you gotta bring it back sometime to close that loop, but you got to hang them in there. It's a lot more, I guess, suspenseful. Those true spy novels, those deep espionage books. I think that's a hard thing to craft, and I could see why it could take a little while to really, really master it and get it figured out, because especially someone like you, who that's your reputation, they're going to see that CIA paramilitary and go, oh, this dude was a spy. If you write a spy novel, then they're expecting a certain level of authenticity and facts from you, even though it's still fiction. It's not going to be 100%, but that expectation is kind of there. So I could see that being a challenge.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with Lee Goldberg once, and he was the script writer for Monk, if you remember that TV show. And he writes all types of noir mysteries out here in LA now. Extremely talented, very engaging gentleman.
Yes.
Really, really liked my conversation with him. But he said it really well once. He wants enough authenticity in his novels that somebody who understands that world or is from that world or reads a lot about that world will believe that what he is writing is credible, but that he is also striving to make sure he's entertaining and suspenseful and a good read. So it's finding that, that little target right there of how much realism to put in. Because I tell you, there were some times out there as a paramilitary officer, I spent 16 hours a day in front of a computer, and that's what I was doing. And there are other times out there where I may be spending 16 hours a day and then maybe 4 hours out operating on a target, or maybe it was completely reversed. That there's these elements of realism that we've got to sometimes just put aside because, like I said, I don't think I've ever seen James Bond ride a cable. But his movies and stories are great.
And he's the ultimate spy. I mean, the world of renowned James Bond.
There you go. Yeah.
So before I let you go, tell everybody where they can find more about you and they can get their copy of The Underhanded, and stay tuned as to what you're going to be doing here in the future with your follow-ups and your new offerings.
Yeah. So my books are available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all major retailers and independent bookstores. You can get them. My website is adamsikes.com. You can look at me there. I have a newsletter. You can sign up for it if you want. And we talk about all things. I call it the Black Cash. And we talk about all things from either writing to, realism and spy fiction and a few other things, as well as announcements. And so those are some areas you find out more about me, as well as this podcast and our conversation, Jeff. I've really, really enjoyed this.
Yes, sir. Well, thanks for doing it. Thanks again for the book. And, I'll be sure to plug it when it comes out. And I wish you the best of luck with The Underhanded. And again, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you. Appreciate it.